geoblocking, which is blocking IP addresses based on their geographic location. You've got a list of IP addresses and you need to get them into your firewall. And we're going to look at how to do that with NFTABLES. NFTABLES is the firewall that's built into most of the newer Linux distributions. Debian Buster 10, Ubuntu 20.04, Red Hat version 8, and all of its clones like Alma Linux and Rocky Linux version 8, SUSE 15, and Fedora 32 all have NFTABLES as their default firewall. I'm going to give you a link here to go look at the wiki page for NFTABLES that will give you information on how to configure NFTABLES. I'm just looking at setting up the sets in NFTABLES and getting them available so that you can create firewall rules for them. There's a link here for the wiki. There's also a link here that I'm going to put in for the Red Hat portal that has information on NFTABLES. If you don't have access to this, you can create a developer account for free, and then you can read all their documentation. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use an Alma Linux system. This is version 8.4. The command that you use to manage the tables is nft. And I want to see the tables that are available. Now, these tables are created automatically by the system. Since there's a table here called Firewall D, I know that Firewall D is running and it's making its own firewall entries. Firewall D is a front end for NFTABLES. So you create the rules that you want in Firewall D, and it in turn creates rules that are in NFTABLES. So if I want to look at this Firewall D rule, I could NFT list table. I'm going to pipe it to Morse so it doesn't scroll past. So these are just all things that get put in when Firewall D is creating its rules. And NFTABLES will actually go through all of these various tables and apply the rules that are there. And it has something called chains within them. So if it has an input chain and a forward chain and an output chain, just like your old IP tables had. And what we want to do is we want to put our rules inside of this input chain that's on the IP filter table. I'll include these notes in a link below here. But basically, these are the commands to create the set, first of all. And you have to give it the interval flag since it's going to hold subnets. The type tells you what type of addresses you can hold. If that was a 6, you could hold IP version 6 addresses. So we're going to take that first command and create the set. Now we go back to look at that IP filter. We see the black hole set is there. And it's listed along with the rest of the chains that are there. So now we have to put something into that set. So we're going to add an IP address. On this second line, we're going to add 2 IP addresses. Then the third line, we're going to add some network ranges. Now you can mix and match all you want. You just have to use the format that's listed here. So I'm going to add those elements. Looking back at my notes, I can list the actual, this will let me go in and see what's in this set. So I'm telling it to list the set that's in the IP filter table, and the name is called black hole. So when I go and look at that table, I can see these are the entries that are there. You'll notice that they're not in the order that I put them in. They're in an order that NFTABLES wants them to be in, which appears to be lowest to highest. So you've got entries in that set, and you have to be able to query those entries. And this is the command, the get element. We'll go in and look for entries in your sets. And I called mine black hole. And let's do that first one. 3.4. So I'm telling NFTABLES to go and tell me if you have this in that set, and it responds with this, which is a positive response, which means it's there. Now, if I go and I look for something that's not in the table, I'm sorry, not in the set, you'll get an error message. The error means that this entry is not in the table. I'm sorry, not in the set. But remember, we've got a subnet range here. So if we were going to go to look for something in that subnet, let's go 172.15. Let's go 4.55. When I look for 4.55, it tells me that it's in that set because it follows this network range here. Now, using the /22, I also know that 5.55 is in that range. So when I query for it, it shows it there. I do an NFT list for that set. You can see this is the format that they want when you add these addresses to NFTABLES. So it wants set, then the name of the set, the type is IP4 addresses. The flags interval has to be there so that you can enter subnets. So I'm going to use this template for the zones that I download. I'm going to give it a name, give it a type in the flags. But when you create the actual file, you have to put the brackets around your range. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, if you want to get a list of IP addresses by country, you can just Google it, look for country IP blocks. You'll get a few to come up, but the one that I found that works the best was the IP to location. They have what they call a free visitor list, and it's just a list of IPs. That's all it is. And what I want to do is I want to get the United States list. And I want version IP4 first. And I want the CIDR, which is just the bare IPs and the bare subnets. That's all it is. So I'm going to download that. It downloads it to a file called firewall text, firewalltext.gz. And you'll do the same thing for the IP version 4. Now, if you go back into this site, they have products that you can download. You're downloading a list that's maintained by them. And to make sure that that list is accurate, they offer plans that let you download the most current version. And they also offer APIs so that you can automate the downloading of those programs. Instead of coming to this web page and hitting download, you can write a script that'll go out and download it automatically. And the lowest one they have is like $49 a year, which seems pretty good if you're going to be doing this for a company. So once you've got those files downloaded, I unzipped it and I put it into this file. Oops. Did I type it wrong? IP4.IP2. Text. So as you can see, they put a little header information at the top, and they just give you ranges of IPs that are registered to the United States. And it's just list after list after list of network ranges. If I do a WC-L on that, the file length is 269,000. So there's 269,000 IPs and subnets in this list. But remember, what we're trying to do is to go from a list of subnets that we got in that file to this format that NFTABLES will understand. So basically, you're going to have to put some information on top of the list, at the bottom of the list, and at the end of each subnet, there has to be a comma. The easiest way I found to do this was using sed. I'm going to take the first 30 lines of that file that I downloaded so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to send that to a file called Joe. So in this sample file that we're working with, we've got the header at the top and we've got the subnets. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start making that file look like this format, where it says set America and all this. So what we have to do is we have to remove the comments from the top of the file. Put that on top. So we're going to remove these comments from the top of the file. And we're going to use this sed command, which says search for any lines starting with a pound sign and then delete them. We're also going to have to space over these subnets. So they're at the beginning of the line here. We're going to put a little space between them. And that's basically what this does. It looks for the beginning of the line and it puts some space there. We're also going to need commas at the end. So to modify this file, we need to get rid of the pound signs, which are comments at the top. So we're going to find any line that starts with a pound and delete it. We then need some space before the lines so that it matches this format. So we're going to go to the beginning of each line and add some spaces. And we need to put commas at the end of the line, which is this format here. So when we put these, we're going to go to the end of the line, which is the $sign, and we're going to put a comma there. Now at the last line, there's no comma and there's a closing bracket. So we're going to have to go, we're going to have to go to the last line. The $sign by itself there means go to the last line. It's going to find the last character at the end of the line, which is a comma in this case. And we're going to replace it with a space and the closing bracket. Then our format here, there's two more brackets at the bottom, but one spaced over a little bit. So we're going to add this sed command with a $sign A is an add. It appends to the bottom of the file. We're going to add a tab and then the closing bracket. Then we're going to add just a closing bracket and a line carriage return or line return, whatever you want to call it. So this set of sed commands is going to give us the format that we're looking for this table IP filter. Where's the last one? I forgot the last one. We also have to add a header at the top of the file. And the sed-i, the one I says insert on the first line of the file. And we're going to insert some text, carriage returns, so that it looks like this. And I'm using the word file, so I'm going to have to call my file that. So let's move Joe to file. All right, didn't take it. Move Joe file. Yes, overwrite it. Clear. So I've got a file called file. And it is just that. So when I run all these sed commands against file, so I'm going to start here and I'm just going to cut and paste. When you paste in a comment, it doesn't do anything. It ignores it, basically. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to paste it in. And when we look at our file, you see the first line is there. It's got the format we want. Got the closing bracket here. It removed the last comma, and you've got our closing brackets there. So the only thing we need left there is our header. So we're going to add this IP version 4 header that we created. We're going to copy that. I'm going to paste that. Bless. So now when we go and look at our file and we compare it to the format that we want, you see we've got table IP filter, we've got a set with a name, we've got a type, we got flags, and I'm using auto merge. Auto merge will look for duplicate entries. You may have an individual IP address, and then you may have a subnet address that includes that IP. If you don't use the auto merge option, it'll give you an error. But the auto merge says if it's already got the range there, that it won't include the individual IP. And right here, you notice that the elements equal, I put it on a separate line with the bracket, and it will still work that way also. So I've got it in the format that I want. Now I'm going to apply those sed commands to the file that I downloaded. But since my script that I'm pasting in uses the file named file with the capital letters, I'm going to copy this to file. And you can see it's the database that I downloaded. So when I go back over and I pull in all those sed commands, it says start here, remove the comments. And you notice it's a little slower. It's because it's a larger file. And I still need to pull in the header. This is what I have for IP4. So when I go to look at that file, you see I've got the table and set information that I needed so that NFTABLES can read it correctly. By tail file, you see I removed the last comma, put the brackets in the way that I want it. So the command to pull in this set is nft-f, then the name of the file, which is file. And I want to see how long it's going to take to do it, so I'm going to time. When you run time and then a command, it'll tell you how long the command took to run. Okay, 3.8 seconds to import all of those subnets that we had there. So now when I do a NFT, when I go and look at that IP filter table, I'm going to type it to less because it's going to be large. See, I've got the filter table. I've got the set black hole that we used as an example before, but I've also got the set that we created by pulling in the file and modifying it. So these are all the elements that are there. And just like we did before, we can NFT but this time we're going to change this to the set that we just created. And we're going to put in an address that I know is the United States. That's the Google DNS address. And you see that it returns because it is in that set. It's included within this range of IPs. Now, I also know that most addresses that start with 220 are not in the US. Most, not all. So I'm going to just put a random address in here. And it says it couldn't find it. That basically means it's not in that set. Now, we also downloaded the IP version 6 network range. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to remove that file. Yes, I want to remove it. We're going to copy the file that we downloaded to File. And we're going to run those sed commands on it. Now for the IP version 6 file, I found that sometimes they will have a trailing slash in there, which is causing a problem. So I put in a sed line for IP6 to remove that. I'm going to run it here. And it just goes through and it finds any line that has a trailing slash and it deletes it. And we go back to our original set of commands. Copy. We run them against that IP6 file. We have to go back and put the header in. Now the IP version 6 header is a little different. The only difference is you say IP6 type filter, give it a different name, of course, and tell it it's an IP version 6 address. Okay. So when I go and look at the file, I can see that I've got the header here and I've got all the IP version 6 addresses that I need. And the last time I did this, there were 2 entries that caused a problem. I'm going to see if they're still there. You would run the same nft-f file command. I want to see if there's a difference in time in the version 4 and version 6. Okay, if you get any type of error, go all the way up to your first error. Your first error is usually an indication of what the problem is. This first error is most likely causing all these other errors. And these are the 2 that I was having problems with before. Because they have a single comma there. It's not a correct format. It should be single colon. It should be 2 colons. So I'm going to go in my file and search for this right here. All right, there it is right there, and it has a single. I'm going to make it a double. And its buddy is right there beneath it with a single. I'm going to make that a double. Oops. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to run that command again. Remember, if you get a long list of errors, go all the way to the top and fix the first error. Okay, that took 5 seconds, so 2 seconds longer. I did notice that on a Redhat system running Audit D, the time varied from 5 seconds to 6 minutes. It appears to be related to Audit D running. I'm not exactly sure what it's doing, but if you're on a Redhat system and it's taking a while, just let it sit and it will complete. This IP6 filter, and I'm going to pipe it through less because I know it's going to be long. Unexpected. What? Oh, list table. You have to type it the way it's listed. So I'm in the IP6 filter. I've got my set name, and I've got all my IP version 6 addresses. And we can check that. NFT. All right, we're going to look at America 6. It is an IP6 filter, and we need an IP6 address, which is 2001. That is Google's IP version 6 DNS address, and you can see that it's listed there. Node 44 is also there. So we verified that we've got the sets, IP version 4 and version 6. Now we have to apply rules that will be able to use these. And let's see what I got here. A rule would look something like this for IPv4. You reference the rule with the @ sign. So you can input and say source address not equal something. Same with IP version 6, you reference it with an @ sign. NFTABLES is the same on every distribution. So here's a Rocky Linux system. And these are the same files. All I did was mount them on an NFS system so that I can see them from every system. So I'm on the Rocky Linux system and I have that same file. I do an NFT list tables. You can see that firewall D is there because Rocky uses firewall D. But I want to see what's in this table. Okay, it's just an input, forward, and output. And I've kind of noticed that most distros use capital input here for that chain. But Redhat was the only one that used a lowercase. But I've still got that same file. And on Rocky Linux, I do the same thing, nft-f, and then file. And it will pull in that file and put it to a set in the NFTABLES list. Type the less. So we have the same set enter IP6 filter on a different distribution. Same thing with same thing with Debian 11. When I do an NFTABLES list, now Debian has just an IP filter in here. So if I look at their filter, you can see a bunch of stuff already in here. These UFW chains means that Debian is running UFW as their firewall. And it's also running Docker, and Docker puts its own firewall commands into it. So these are two front ends that are putting in NFTABLES rules. And again, it has an input rule here with a capital I. And I tried just adding, when we get to the rules, I tried just adding the rules to the bottom of this input chain, but it did not work correctly. I'm going to have to insert the rules so that they appear as the first entries in these input chains. But again, what I want to show you is I've got that same file on a Debian system. And again, I'm importing it into NFTABLES, NFT list table. Okay, so it adds it to that. And just to show you, if you run the UFW status on a Debian system that has UFW installed, you can see that it's permitting only OpenSSH. But again, these rules are written back so that NFTABLES can understand them. We're on Alma Linux already. Here's the Redhat system. It also has NFT. So when I go to look at that table, you can see it's got a very basic table in there. Same for IP version 6. Well, for version 6, I've already put the set in. So it really doesn't matter what distribution you're running. You can add a set that NFTABLES will use, and then you can apply rules to those sets. So the options we have for the sets and the rules are that we can either block the address from accessing all of your ports, or we can do it so that it only blocks certain ports. What I did here is I'm going to leave an example to block it for SSH if it's not in the America set, and a destination port 22, which is SSH in the IP version 6 set. Now, if you have a single interface, you have to remember to add any IP addresses or subnets that are on your internal network that you also want to SSH to this box with. So for example, We're back on Alma Linux. So in my filter in my set that I created called America, my local networks are not in there. So I want to add them to the list. So I'm going to get rid of this sudo. Add that host. I'm going to add the other two networks. So I added my main host, I added my LAN network, and I added one of my VM networks. So if I do a NFT, I didn't do it on this one, did I? Let's go back on the IP4 filter that we created. And I want to look for the IP that we just put in here, the 77.1. Again, IP4. Oh, it's just IP. Okay, since I've added it, it's now in there. So if I were to look up .10, for example, .10 is not in the set that I created, and I didn't go in and add it. So remember, you have to add your internal networks that you want to be able to SSH with to the set that you created. Now, if you have an inside and an outside interface, you can actually apply the rules to just the outside interface, and you don't have to worry about adding your internal networks. But that's more in the documentation for NFTABLES, and I'm not really looking at that right now. I'll do this again. And now if I go back and look at that rule, I have to look at the chain that's in the table called IP filter. And its name is input. All right, here are the rules that I put in. And this is the reason I told you have to put them in reverse order. The first thing I want to do is look at the connection coming in on 22. If it's an existing connection, I want to go ahead and accept it. And I'm going to tag it with this comment that it was established. Now, this is just for my reference. You don't have to put a comment on there if you don't want to. The next thing I'm going to do is if the source address is not in my America group, coming in on port 22, I'm going to log it, and then I'm going to drop it. And I'm going to log it with this prefix right there so I can identify it easier. Now on the Alma Linux box, I'm running a tail on the log. going to go to a box that I know is not in the group. I'm going to go to one of my VMs on the 20 network. All right, see, this one's on 2032. Go to Alma Linux. There are easier ways to show your IP, but that's the way I like to do it. So if I try to SSH to the Alma Linux box from box that's not in the America set, see here it logs, says not America. It gives me the source, it gives me the destination. But you have to realize that most applications, when they can't connect, they will try again. So in this case, it made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It made 5 attempts to connect. And with that log statement in there, it's going to log all 5 of those connection attempts. Now, if you go back and you read the documentation on NFTABLES, there's a way to make it log just the first connection and then not the rest. But that's out of my scope right now. So just to verify, I'm coming from a host that I know is not in that America group. If I come from a host that is in the group, I go it just logs in like normal and it does its normal logging. So you get your regular logging just like usual. Now what you have to remember, the way I'm doing it here, I'm just looking for addresses that are not in the list and I'm blocking them. If they're in the list, I'm not doing anything. So NFTables is going to go on down and process all the rest of the rules and the chains that it has in its list. If I go to the Firewall D front end, you can see that it permits SSH. So it's created a rule in NFTables that says permit SSH. But if I had a rule in Firewall D that says to block SSH, it would block it. So what I'm going to do is, I know that firewall command has a list of zones. One of those zones is called block. If an IP address is in that block zone, it's going to block anything coming from it. So remember, we added our local network to the set called America, which means it will not be blocked. But then we get down into the firewall command and it created a set of rules and we told it to block it. And we put the wrong IP in there. It should have been, let's make it the whole 30 network. Because 20 is already blocked because it's not in the list. And let's reload. So now we're on a box that is on the 30 network. When we go to SSH 10.10.30.99, which is the Alma Linux box, you get the no route to host. That's the Redhat / CentOS Alma Linux Rocky way of saying there's a firewall involved and I can't connect to it. Now, if that rule was not there, let's see, I've got oh, I'm on the wrong host. I need to be on Alma Linux. Let's say we take it out of the block source. Either delete or remove. Let's try remove. Reload. So now when we're on that box, which was here, you get your prompt. But you have to remember that the NFTABLES rules are processed depending on, so you have to remember that NFTABLES will process all the rules that it has. So if firewall command, you're running firewall D, it's going to put a set of rules in there. If you put your own custom rules in there, it's going to apply all of those. So it'll go through all these tables and apply the rules that are there. So there you have all the steps to take a list of IP addresses, get them put into a set that NF filter will recognize. I gave you commands to massage that list so that you can put it into a format that NFTABLES will recognize. All you have to do now is write a script to automate all this and then send me the results so that I can add them to the video. Thanks for watching.